when you grew from, like 5 figures to 6 figures to 7 figures, like all of those big jumps,
Yeah.
what's like the strategy shift and like the mindset shift that you had to make? Because I think strategy is great and strategies are everywhere. But I think not enough people talk about
tactics.
Like,
Yeah. Like
mindset,
the thing. Yeah.
like what your brain has to do and how to like navigate away from those like negative thoughts that pop in all the time. So it's kind of like a two-parter. Like, so what's the shift that you had to make strategy wise that took you to each of those next steps? And then what was the mindset shift that you had to make to take you to those next steps?
One thing that Jocelyn and I have always been able to do is do things really fast to see what happens, right? So I think that's more like in the beginning. That's like the first mindset shift. Like you actually said this a few minutes ago. You were like, hey, that's when I started trying everything, right? When you start throwing mud on the wall, that's the difference. Like everybody starts out with a want to and an idea and, well, I wonder if I could do that, right? But you don't know if something's going to work until you try it. And until you won't know the one thing that works until you try 10 things. So I think that consistently trying things is where people find their first success, right? Like you just started trying things consistently enough to where you figured out the few that worked and then it stacked. Okay. But then you get to this level where you're like, okay, this is where I am now. I know there's something up there. I can see that person doing it. How did I get there? And I started really looking at like how did the people who were where I wanted to be, right? How did they get to where they were? Like how did Pat Flynn get to where he is? How did, Russell Brunson get to where he is? Like how did these people do it? And the one mindset shift I figured out was that they were prolific. And like you hear me say that word all the time. I'm wearing a t-shirt in this interview right now, if you're watching this on YouTube, that says the word prolific with a period at the end of it. All right. And that was the biggest mindset shift that I had that really took us to the $1 million level, to the next level. Because, back in like late 2000, maybe 2015, something like that, I was wondering and thinking of ways to grow. And I started looking at what we were doing. We were sending an email to our list every week, a newsletter. We were doing a podcast. We were doing the right things. We were sharing stuff on social. We were connecting with people and going on interviews. Okay. And I just realized, man, it's not enough. It's not enough. I had to find a way to be more prolific. When I analyzed that mindset shift and that word, what it meant to me was daily, right? Like, am I really showing up every day? Am I really, really strategically showing up in a prolific way every day? Not throwing the mud on the wall. That got me to here, but that won't get me there. Am I prolifically thinking about what I'm doing strategically every day? Do I have a month-long plan? Do I have a plan for my promotions this month? Do I have a plan of what podcast I want to be on, not just hope that somebody's going to reach out and ask me to be on the show? Do I know what content I'm going to make, right? So I decided back in 2015 that I was going to be more prolific than anyone else, okay, at certain things. You can't be prolific at everything, right? That's when I started daily emailing. That's when I started like, no, I'm going to email my list every day. And if they unsubscribe, goodbye. But if they don't, they'll buy from me. And I said, I'm going to be prolific. I'm going to do that. And then I said, I'm going to be prolific in my relationships. I'm going to choose the masterminds I want to be in, and I'm going to work my way in or buy my way in. I don't care. I'm going to be prolific with these relationships. And then we did some other things too. Like we kept our consistency with our podcast. We tried a lot of things there, but that's the biggest mindset shift. If you want to be, if you want to reach 6 figures, which, guys, I hate to tell you this, that's not a huge number for a goal. That's 200 people paying you $50 a month or 400 people paying you $25 a month. If you get 400 people to pay you $25 a month, that should work out to over $100,000 in a year. So you can get there. Like, this is not a monumental mountain moving task, right? But you are going to have to choose the ways you're going to be prolific to get there. Okay. So that would be the first thing I would say to anybody in your position. Like, I'm at 250. I'm going to get to 300. I'm going to make it to 500 faster than I got to 250. Right. You've got to pick the ways you're going to be prolific and then have a plan to execute your prolificness. Like, right. Like, if I get up every morning and the first thing I write down on my calendar to this day is the hour that I'm going to spend crafting an email for my list, right? That's what I'm prolific. I've averaged 1.8 emails a day since 2015. I send an email an average of 1.8 because you got weekends and holidays and stuff that kind of kill your batting average. But I'm prolific. So you have to say, what's working the best right now for my list? What's happening the most? Look, what gets me the best results? I'm going to become more prolific there than anybody else. So the concept here that we're trying to figure out to get to the next level, right, is to be prolific. That you got to be consistent first. You got to work. Kathy put in the consistency path. Sometimes that takes people 3 months of consistency. Sometimes it takes 3 years of consistency before something happens, right? So everybody listening to this, if you're just starting out, if you've just got an idea, if you're just thinking about it, you're not winning in the game because you're not in the game. You got to get the consistency first. That's why we focus so hard in the Flip Your Life Blueprint on being consistent, right? Like one course at a time, one step at a time, take your next step. Kathy's done that. So now we're going to fast forward to what it looks like to get to the next level, to be prolific. It actually is going to make your business easier when you become prolific. People think it's going to get harder because I got to do more. I got to be prolific. No, it becomes easier. Like think about John Lee Dumas. John Lee Dumas has one job. He used to do a podcast every day. His entire focus was getting guests on his podcast and batching them all in 1 week for an entire quarter. It was simple. And that freed him to go do other things. He didn't have to think about anything else, right? People, when they hear me say be prolific, another thing they mess up is do a lot of things. That's not what I'm talking about. Do one thing a lot. That's what I'm talking about, all right? Like your email strategy is your challenges and your webinar. Now just do those two things. Like that's all you're doing, right? Just make people go to those things. So pick one or two things to be prolific. Like when I first started being prolific, Kathy, the other day I screwed this up. So I was like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to have 4 podcasts a week, and I'm going to go live on YouTube every day. I'm going to write an email list every day too. I'm going to be so prolific. I'm just going to wake up every day at 5 a.m. and for 3 straight hours, I'm going to do this, and this. How long do you think that lasted? Like, right. You can go back and see this little window of about a month and a half where there was like, I released like 10 YouTube videos and like there was a podcast 4 times a week. And then I just looked over and said, yeah, this isn't possible. We can't do this. So then I was like, I can wake up and email my list over coffee. I can do that. So that's what I picked.